Hey folks, normally I do a podcast on history. Today I just wanted to get this thought out there, kind of inspired by several people. One podcast in particular is the Tom Rhodes Show. Great comedian, great podcast. It's one of my personal favorites. Definitely check it out. And I have a question for you. Who do you trust these days? Not just with your life, but just in general. Who can you trust? Can you trust your preacher, your priest? What about the pharmaceutical companies that sell us their products, say they're safe, and then they kill or cripple us? What about the doctors whose negligence kills and injures more people than cancer and heart disease combined? And, by the way, who want protection from lawsuits for those wrongs? Do you trust them? Can you trust the lawyers who are the most ruthless, money-hungry devils on the planet? How about newspapers? I mean, by the way, most of them are owned by a few mega corporations anyway. Do we trust the companies that destroy the forests or the Department of Interior, whose job it is to save them? How about trusting the chicken industry to serve us poultry that's not foul and not full of hormones that cause little girls to need a bra at the age of 10? What about the cattle industry and the milk full of unhealthy crap? How about nations suffering an epidemic of cancer? How about the insurance companies who insure our health and our homes and our lives? You see, when you buy an insurance company or an insurance policy, you only buy a contract that a group of insurance company lawyers wrote. That contract, the policy you bought, has so many holes in it, you could slam it over the front door and use it for a screen. And if you suffer a loss, they might offer you half of what you actually sustained. So do you want to sue? You have every right to file a lawsuit. I mean, you're an American. The courts are open. All you need is a lawyer who'll take your case against one of the largest corporations in the world. You see, you don't have the money to pay the costs, the hundreds, maybe thousands of pages of depositions, which, by the way, cost about $5 a page. You can't hire the experts who charge minimum $1,000 an hour. And you're just trying to get the $50,000 the insurance company owes you. Of course, you'll have to wait 2 years to get your case heard, and then there's all those appeals that will take a couple of more years. And whenever this trial takes place, it's before a judge who, more than likely, represented those insurance companies before he was chosen for the bench, put up there by a corporate-owned governor or a corporate-owned president. And your case is one of hundreds in the judge's court, and he's to get rid of the cases that are piling up. And he has the power to dump yours. It's called summary judgment. Surprise, you get no jury. But no one said you don't have the right to sue. Now, what was my point? Oh yeah, I would rather trust the mob for full, honest protection than insurance companies. What about politicians? Can you trust them to represent you? Will you get anything but a form letter from Senator J. Harvey How Much when you complain that the local chicken company is fouling your well? So when you turn on the tap, you get chicken crap tea? Face it, people, politicians are owned, lock, stock, and down to their gonads, if they have any, by the corporate overlords who put them in office. So you see, Democrats are different? Well, if you take a close look, you'll find Democrats are feeding off the same pig trough as Republicans, a trough filled with corporate greed. And you hear those politicians on both sides yammering at each other with a slightly different set of adjectives. It's all a show. But the corporations who have no vote, who aren't alive, who are not citizens, who shouldn't have rights comparable to those of a human being, who indeed live on and on while we grow old and die, they own our democracy, a government of, by, and for corporations. Can you trust corporations and their CEOs? The kind that, face it, have caused irreparable damage? Do we trust Enron? How about WorldCom? Tyco? There's a man named Henry Pontel who is a professor of criminology at UC Irvine, and he said that white-collar criminals cause more pain, more death, and more financial loss than all common criminals combined. The price of bailing out just one corrupt financial institution during the savings and loan crisis in the 80s exceeds the total loss of all bank robberies in history. Corporations thrive on crime. They bloat on it. It's become an acceptable norm for corporations to cut corners, to lie, to cook the books, to do insider trading, to mess up the environment, to bribe and cheat wherever it's profitable, and to end up owning both parties so they can continue their unholy war for profits at the expense of workers and shareholders. The FBI estimates that all robbery in the U.S. costs $3.8 billion a year, compared to, for example, $100 to $400 billion for corporate healthcare fraud, $40 billion for corporate auto repair fraud, and you think mechanics are honest, $15 billion for corporate securities fraud. The savings and loan swindle in the 1980s alone is estimated to have cost up to $500 billion. So let's take a look at some of our leading corporate citizens. After all, corporations are people. Let's look at Bayer, the aspirin people, who overcharged Medicaid and settled the matter for $250 million. What about Boeing, who is charged with bribery, fraud, kickbacks, military contract, and export law violations? They settled for a mere $100 million. So how about Citigroup, the biggest loser of all the 10 major brokerage firms? It paid $400 million of the $1.43 billion in fines against those firms for misleading investors. And how about the good old company that says things go better with Coke? They settled a racial discrimination lawsuit by black employees for $192.5 million. These fines and settlements don't even leave a blood splat on the windshield of those corporate giants. What they paid out in fines for their potpourri of malfeasance is merely a minor cost of doing business. Is there profit in corporate crime? Absolutely. The CEOs who have not been charged personally with any crime, this includes most CEOs of corporate criminals, they continue on as accepted good citizens. They're welcomed at the country club. They're looked upon as the epitome of success. Many go to church on Sunday and give heartily, of course, publicly as well, to charities. More to art museums than a soup line for the homeless. More to music festivals than to homes for battered women. How much trust does the average American invest in America's business? The New York Times said that it's clear that disaffection is spreading. In a poll by Roper, 72% of respondents felt that wrongdoing was widespread in the industry. Last year, 66% felt such was the case. If we can trust anyone, if we can't trust anyone, not even the local butcher with his fingers on the scale, who can you trust? You see, we've turned into a paranoid nation, but not without good cause. We live in a frightened world populated with vicious human animals who want to devour us, sort of a social cannibalism. All this corruption and abuse of decency makes us angry, and we hate. The only effective voice that masses listen to is TV and talk radio. And it's cheap to the networks. Just put on a bloodthirsty woman and some fool who will verbally word wrestle with her, and you got a program that sells big time. No actors, no production costs, just a couple of cameras, a couple of chairs, and the inevitable screams, snarls, and sarcasm. Hate. It's like in George Orwell's 1984, where the party members were subjected to 2 minutes of hate every day, sometimes hate week. Hate was the basis of Big Brother's control. Hate and lies in the demand for unconditional blind loyalty. Remember, in this country we call it patriotism. My country, right or wrong, moral or immoral, honest or criminal, doesn't make a difference. In my country, even if all this dementia, debt, and death supplies more profit for the corporate culture, hey, it's been wrested from the lives of those who never had it and never will. Don't you all feel better now? I want to talk about Bill O'Reilly and Fox News, specifically Bill O'Reilly. He's a guy from the old school. He believes that parents, that's the last resort, should be able to administer corporal punishment on their children, although, as we know, by the time corporal punishment is required, the parent-child relationship has probably already failed. He's sad that mothers have babies out of wedlock, but he doesn't have an answer for that. By the way, he thought George W. Bush was honest, but maybe that's because he also thinks he's too mentally challenged to be successfully dishonest. O'Reilly said that Bush is a child of privilege and brings a sense of entitlement, a charter member of that power establishment club that plays by its own rules. Kind of agree with him on that, except his immigration policy. He supported the near total Bush agenda, including that of war. He was an apologist for Bush. He hated Clinton. He hates Obama. And he leans right just far enough he doesn't fall out of his chair. You see, in important ways, he suffers from a neocon mindset, and oh, how he hates to have the conservative label pinned on him. Well, Bill, you are a conservative, as are those who in most ways want things to remain as they were 200 years ago. You say a person makes or breaks it on hard work and good values. That's true. But if we're not born with a good set of genes as you were, we'll have to join the rabble and thrash around in some cold river of misery without an education, a good job, health insurance, and old age benefits. The good old American way. And let's us who are lucky, and those of us who enjoy a modicum of success are mostly lucky, we go after those goodies and we keep them. And while those who aren't, the poor, the uneducated, the physically, mentally challenged, the children of those that you speak of without fathers, well, they just have to be obedient citizens and quit complaining and not ask for help and not demand a better salary and not even raise the minimum wage. No, that's not good for America. And by all means, don't put a new roof on the Constitution. He wants to stick with the old one, even though it no longer covers a nation that has expanded geographically, economically, scientifically 100 times over, and it's now a nation of more than 250 million people of every race and creed and religion. You see, Bill, our problem's different today. It's the 21st century. We go to the moon, and we don't struggle in Constitution Hall by candlelight. And besides, as we know, our founders didn't recognize slaves as people, or women, or indentured servants, or people who own no land, so those people weren't given a right to vote. So when you talk about staying with the original construction of the Constitution, where does that leave you, Bill? On the other hand, corporations had no rights as people in those days, and they're not people, and the founders had no intention that they should enjoy the same protections as actual human beings. If we applied the original intent of the Constitution today, corporations would never have the right of living human beings as they do now. Rupert Murdoch's Fox corporations and all of their corporate advertisers who, with other corporate behemoths, control America, what would you say to that, Bill? Kind of makes you shiver, don't it? You see, you say we're a flag-waving network that looks to America's past for perspective, but that's not very helpful to the current problems that most Americans are facing. The chief reason that Bill O'Reilly is a conservative is that, like all conservatives, he offers no real solutions for major issues. He pretends to champion these causes, such as better wages, workable health insurance, education for deserving children, control on the corporate thugs that are destroying the planet, an unfettered national voice for the ordinary citizen, reform of the election laws that have permitted corporations to own the country and enslave our people. Here's a general rule to remember. Conservatives do not have answers, only the same worn-out idea, like cutting taxes on the rich, supporting ever-increasing power and profit for corporations, playing a game of politics that smears those who try to help ordinary citizens survive. You see, part of the truth is this. As he says, our federal government's not good at helping real people who have real problems, and it doesn't care about the money you give as long as the revenue train keeps chugging along. Right. But you fail to state the government is good at aiding corporations. You say the government's good at waging war and collecting taxes from individuals. Right again. But what about the inability to collect just taxes from your corporate sponsors? You see, Bill, you forgot to mention that. You see, the system's not designed to aid the individual, which, sadly, is still right on. What you fail to state is that the system is owned by the corporate king, which uses your employer and your employer's advertisers. In many ways, you supported and stuck up for the conduct and decisions of Boy George, and you attacked more liberals and Democrats than you did conservatives and Republicans. You're like most people. You're a mixture of beliefs and ideas from both camps. But see, Bill, you end up leaning so far to the right that only you, in deep denial, could claim you're not a conservative. You claim you were once a registered Republican. Doesn't make you a bad person. So was I when I was young and inexperienced. So when did you see the light? About the time you got a good going on the media, right? Half your audience, supposedly, belongs to the Democratic Party. You have to be seen as a man of the working class, a man who will take up the cudgel for the ordinary Joe. In a way, you remind me of one of the great comic figures of literature, Don Quixote, referred to as that muddle-headed fool with frequent lucid intervals who mistook windmills for giants. Of course, I'm all against the pollution of our young with the junk on TV. I'm not in favor of certain movie with poor stories, but We despise individuals who lie and cheat, and you take them on ruthlessly. It's fine with me. Of course, we're distressed if some pundit says unkind things about us. Hey, I know the feeling. Of course, we're upset with the Catholic Church, which is shamefully passive on its priests who mess with little boys. And by the way, you're Catholic, so you openly shove it back up the Vatican. And we don't like newspapers, especially the New York Times, that the paper doesn't agree with our conservative bent. All those battles he takes on TV, the ones you take, Bill, they're understandable. Hey, some of them I even agree with, but you never take on the real dragon, that corporate king. You see, he's a good guy in a bad trap, and he holds himself out as a friend of the working class, but he can't really befriend himself. You see, his trap is his work, and he works for the same corporate king. Daily, you live with and you take orders from your henchmen. You can't take on corporate power structures, those advertisers, the car manufacturers, the drug companies, the mortgage mafia. You can't attack the banks and the credit card companies and those corporations that sell all the junk that the consuming public believes it owns. You can't. But you hint at it from time to time. Your trap's worse than that. You know the fear and anger and hatred that lies out there among the people, and you're also shamelessly tapping into it for ratings. You can say, that Jennifer Lopez or Whitney Houston or Bill Clinton are your only true love and culture with a vengeance or perhaps with just cause, and that hate boils over in your voice, in your written word, and the people respond. Hate. God bless America. And your ratings soar. But if we don't hear anything about redistribution of wealth and that Bush and his gang have accomplished to the unconscionable entrenchment and enrichment of the corporate king, it's like an old child's trick. The clown's coming through the door. When the other kid looks, the first kid throws a big piece of pie out the kid's plate. Those in power play the same trick. Hey, look at the gays. They want to marry. We got to stop them. Hey, look at those abortionists. Air quote. We have to defeat them. And so when the people look and hate and rail and fume and beat the walls, Bush was reelected. And the corporate thugs steal the goodies of the nation and mortgage us and our grandchildren. And they steal to the hilt. All the while, the corporate kings cackle and crow. You called for the little guy's attention every night to whatever horror and crime or outrage comes along. And while you're yelling about these contemptibles, these despicable, indictable, shameful, whatever they are, your master, the corporate king, remain untouched by you. But, here's the big but, you are simultaneously providing a fix for the masses who love their hate. Now, Bill, you worry that people see you as a bully, but you are. People who have power use it. You're not going to beat yourself up on your own show. I mean, you have the ability of a solid cross-examiner. You would have been great as a trial lawyer. There you could have really fought for the rights of people. And anyone who comes on your program with a view opposing yours, expects to be fully heard, is an idiot. You're a big fish in your show. The people like seeing some poor bastard get his justly deserved comeuppance. And as we already know, a good brawl makes for good ratings, and you provide it. Doesn't mean you're a bad person, because you're not. But you're a bully. You complain that people describe you as contentious, as bombastic, as blowhard. Poor Bill. But let me be the first. You're incisive. Whether you're courageous as you see yourself is another thing. You have to be afraid to be courageous. Courageous people do what must be done despite their fear. That's courage. What do you have to fear? You follow the party line of your bosses. For all their shameless hypocrisy, you don't take on the real demagogues, the Pat Robertsons or the Jerry Falwells, because they were powerful within your party. You leave the real villain, that non-living, non-breathing master that's oppressing and enslaving people, destroying their freedom, the corporate king, essentially untouched. You take on the easy ones, those who are at least mostly the windmills of Don Quixote, individuals who are not as skilled as you, defending their positions, including the solution of which will not change the status of the working class. And you have control of your show. What appears to be courageous, and courage, it may seem courageous to you, is the dynamic that makes your shows sell. A lot of people think like you, and they love to see who oppose your views I'd like to see him beat up. Fun? Yes. Courageous? Not at all. You almost get there, Bill, and they veer off just in time. You see, this is what you said about the corporate media. Quote, the people who really run network news are money men, profit guys. You're right. You said news is a major pain in the butt to them because news is expensive. Controversy is almost forbidden on the nightly news. The philosophy is, don't rock the corporate boat. Don't get anyone mad at you. I take it that you mean don't get one of your advertisers mad at you, right? I thought so. Then you almost reached that promised land of truth. See, here's what you said. Quote, since all the network news organizations, including Fox, are run by huge corporations, and these enterprises are loath to criticize each other or themselves, you don't see consistent, incisive coverage of the damage. Now, watch how you suddenly veer off, okay? Here we go. That many media operations are doing to the children of this country. Bill, you almost said it. You were on the verge of saying those huge corporations don't cover the damage they're doing to all Americans. All, period, Americans, period, exclamation point. This consumerism you speak of, the enslavement of debt, the fear and hatred they sell. Instead, you neatly narrowed your criticism to hurting children. Of course, they do hurt children, but the national hurt is that these corporations and the advertisers control what the American people hear and what they see and what they think. Collectively, they become the voice of the king, of the master, who tells the people what to buy, how to pay for it, who to hate, and against who to go to war. But all you assert is that they hurt the kids. You see, that's safe. Leave out the ubiquitous damage caused by the corporate voice that you work for. It's not courageous, Bill. You're quietly sucking up to the corporate king. Now, you're right on when you say from time to time they're conscious of the outside world, these corporations. American babies are bombarded with messages of consumption in a way that brainwashes them, sometimes permanently. You say this better than I would have, Bill. You see, you go on to observe that the buying power of the American consumer drives the country, and it's addictive as nicotine. Try again. Try heroin. You see, Wall Street depends on it, and the government protects it. Of course, you veer off once again. So what's your solution? No one, especially you, are out there telling your listeners that they're becoming enslaved as a result of the addiction that you identify, consumerism, that people are interest slaves. They buy to satisfy their nearly insatiable craving for things. I call it thingism. But you remain mute about the need of people to have an independent voice, completely independent, and that'll honestly educate the people or help them educate themselves. Instead, the people turn to your program to hear your wisdom, to witness your courage, and to get their fix of hate. And as a bonus, they get to listen to all these endless, inane commercials. You know the one. You know what I'm saying is true. You just can't say it. Now, here's kind of an average Bill O'Reilly show to me. You bait some barely articulate woman to do something with Christians kidnapped in Iraq. And so you yell, and you yell loud, and you can't tell what her position is, and you yell at her, you yell over her. You can't tell what his position is, and he's loud, and he's hollering. You shout that her position is ridiculous. You never get to the point. You cut her off. Boom. You win, right? Commercials. Get a Buick. Get Flonase. Something for your nostrils. Get a mortgage. Lending Tree. Get a computer. Capital One. Conoco. Use gas. Get a Subaru. Hey, watch Boxing on Showtime. By the way, check out this show on the Da Vinci Code on the History Channel. Back to Bill. You're pissed off by a member of the royal family in Saudi Arabia who killed somebody as a repeat drunk driver, only gets a year in Martha's Vineyard, a jail, kind of like a bed and breakfast. Victim's family members giggle. Her lawyer says it's unjust. More commercials. Get a Ford. Get this purple drug that you should probably ask your doctor about. Get a plasma TV. Make sure it's a good one. Back to Bill. The tragic death of Bob and Lynell Shapiro's son from the drug ecstasy mixed with alcohol. They're going to establish a national awareness program. Commercials again. Something about Lucerne, pink Lucerne, I think. Get a debit card, get a rebate card, get talking dolls of presidents, and one of Ann Coulter, by the way, looks just like her. Back to Bill. Some young guy says there are 850 lawyers out there who are going to fight to keep the nativity scenes. ACLU lost. Black preacher wants stores to say Merry Christmas. Many people say, I don't know, they're against saying Merry Christmas. They really don't care. Catholic school teacher gets fired. She got pregnant out of wedlock. Does this violate her civil rights? Not that she's pregnant, but that she's been fired. You get Bill Donahue saying no, she works for the church and it violates her contract. ACLU says that men don't get pregnant. Firing a woman for doing so violates the equal protection, the law. More commercials. Ford, again. The Explorer, Lunesta, or something. Something about a computer. Home loan. 97biz.com, some scheme about making money. Back to Bill. You go nuts about a newspaper claims what the pregnant Catholic teacher did in getting pregnant out of wedlock was no different than what the Virgin Mary did. You rage, you scream. You're about to implode in a loud psychotic episode. Say the paper is either anti-Christian or nuts. Take the virgin birth as fact. And say the paper is lying about something sacred. More commercials. Scott Trade, Office Depot, Van Housen Shirts, Fox Channel ad for itself. You talk about your interview with Katie Couric and say that you have to, we definitely have to check it out. Just go to BillO'Reilly.com. Now, I have never seen a faster, nastier talking human, a louder person, a discourageous men, a bigger bully. And then bam, more commercials. And bam, here's Bill, pushing and shoving his way on every issue. Pow, more commercials. Another one, more commercials. And, I don't know. Kind of makes you feel like you're exhausted. You see, you can never tell the truth about what's going on, about the corporate corruption going on in this country. You can't talk about it. Because if you did, let's face it, you would lose all the money you've made. And we can't have that, can we, Bill? That's just something that I thought about. And I appreciate you guys listening. Give me the time. And thanks a lot. Appreciate it.